where you're joining us from. It would be really cool to find out where you all are. I'm in Ann Arbor, Michigan, by the way. Rebecca, where are you?
I'm in Seattle, Washington.
Oh, we got London and Somerville. Look at all these places. This is cool. Got someone else in Ann Arbor. Winnipeg, DC, Cambridge. A lot of Massachusetts. All right, South Africa. This is fun. Vegas, Indonesia, Rome, DC. Krista Sue from Ann Arbor, my peeps. Arizona. And my parents should be on too, but I don't think they've ever used chat, so they are probably not going to say where they're joining from. Pennsylvania. Another Philly. I guess it's a little bit early for the West Coasters. It's a lot of East Coasters.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on your location. My name is JC Sue. I'm an MPP candidate at Harvard Kennedy School and a communication lead of the Asian American and Pacific Islander Caucus, a student organization at HCAS, which strives to provide an inclusive and a supportive community for Asian American and Pacific Islander students and to represent issues facing the Asian American Pacific Islander community. I want to start with a few announcements on the Ash Center's behalf. The Ash Center would like to acknowledge the land on which Harvard sits as a traditional territory of the Massachusetts people and a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among nations. Today's event is being recorded and the video will be made publicly available on the Ash Center YouTube channel. You're welcome to submit questions anytime throughout the duration of the event. Please send them via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen instead of submitting them via the chat. I'd like to thank and acknowledge all the co-sponsors for today's discussion: the Ash Center for Democratic Governance and Innovation, Fairbanks Center for Chinese Studies, Harvard University Asia Center, Harvard Kennedy School Office of Career Advancement, Harvard Kennedy School Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging, and Harvard Kennedy School Asian American and Pacific Islander Caucus. And a thank you to the Alumni Office at HKS as well for sharing this event with alumni. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's discussion. Soojin Kwon is the Managing Director for the MBA program and admissions at the University of Michigan Ross School of Business. Prior to Ross, Soojin was a manager in Deloitte Strategy and Operations Practice and a Presidential Management Fellow, working for the Senate Budget Committee, House Appropriations Committee, and Department of Commerce. She currently serves on board of the Graduate Management Admission Council and is former board member of the Ford Foundation. Soojin holds an MBA from Michigan Ross, an MPP from Harvard Kennedy School, and a BA in Economics and Political Science at Yale. With that, let me pass this along to Soojin.
Thanks, JC. Hello, and thank you for joining us today. Against the backdrop of a year that has celebrated increases in representation for the AAPI community, but also witnessed a rise in violence against Asian Americans, I am grateful to join 4 Harvard Kennedy School alumni for a conversation on the role of race, gender, and identity in our careers. Whether it's the model minority myth, the bamboo ceiling, the glass ceiling, harmful stereotypes of Asian women and men, or perpetual foreigner syndrome, Asian Americans face many challenges in the workplace and in our communities. Our 4 panelists, who have worked across a broad range of industries and roles, will share their unique experiences and perspectives about being Asian in America. Kei Ashizawa is an attorney specializing in energy and natural resources. She is also a US-Japan relations community organizer. She has an MPA from the Kennedy School, a JD from the University of Houston Law Center, and a BA from UT Austin. Aaron Huang is a US Foreign Service officer specializing in Chinese foreign policy. He is currently a vice consul at the US consulate in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, where it is currently midnight. He has also worked in the UK Parliament's Women and Equalities Committee. He has an MPP from the Kennedy School and a BA from Rice University. Jenny Liu Mallamo is the Deputy Director for Global Communications and Media Relations at the Council on Foreign Relations. Previously, Jenny worked at the New America Foundation and the Brookings Institution. She has an MPP from the Kennedy School and a BA from Kenyon College. And finally, Rebecca Yang is a business advisor to the VP of State and Local Government and Education at Amazon Web Services. She has also worked on Facebook's Global Trust and Safety team and as a US Foreign Service officer in Turkey. She has an MPP from the Kennedy School and a bachelor's degree from Georgetown University. The format for this session is that we'll spend the first 30 minutes learning about the panelists' experiences and then open it up for your questions. As a reminder, you can submit questions through the Q&A button at the bottom, and you can click on the thumbs up button to bring a question to the top. So I'd like to start a conversation by grounding the audience in our respective identities. All of us hold multiple identities: race, gender, class, sexual orientation, religion, etc. The most salient identity for me is being an Asian American woman, because it's what people see and therefore how they engage with me. Another salient part of my identity is being an immigrant. Though my family celebrated our 50th anniversary of moving to the United States this year, my formative years were spent being one of only a few Asians in our community, and with few role models who looked like me in any field, even the common Asian career paths of engineering and medicine, because there were not many Asian women in those fields in the US either. So I'd like to ask each of the panelists what identities are most salient for you and why. Let's start with Kay.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having us today. I'm really looking forward to this talk. And the identity that I most closely relate to is being of mixed race. My mom is a native Texan, and she and I were born in the same hospital. She's white, and my dad is from Japan. So I certainly identify as a mixed race woman. And I, much like Soojin was saying, it's a lot about the perception of others. Most people identify me as Asian American, and so a lot of what I identify as because of that is a reflection of that. Whereas a lot of my peers might, I have many other half peers who are present as if they are white, and they are treated much differently, even though we are the exact same mix. And if they have a different name, same thing. Additionally, my daughter is further mixed. She's half Black. And so I'm constantly thinking about what the Asian American culture really is, where it's going, who is counted in and who's counted out. But those are the main ones for me.
Next, Rebecca.
Yeah, so for me, I would say being Chinese American is the most salient identity for me. I'm a daughter of Chinese immigrants who grew up during the Cultural Revolution, but I was born and raised in the United States. So I've always felt like I've had one foot in China, one foot in the United States. And that hyphenated identity for me has been the most salient throughout my life. I think when I was a kid, perhaps a source of insecurity, shame as well. But as I came to become proud of my heritage, one where I thought that this could be an asset and a strength. And so that's why I ended up joining our diplomatic corps. So currently, professionally, I think of myself as a cross-sector diplomat. I'm in tech now. I previously was in diplomacy, but I think that we can solve our global problems when we break down silos and when we work across borders and work across our differences.
Thanks, Rebecca. Next, Jenny.
Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Much like Soojin, I think Asian American woman is what people see. And so that's kind of informs their initial engagement with me. But for myself, I think I really wear the hats of being the oldest daughter in a first generation immigrant family. So very much playing the role of helping my parents to translate, helping my little sisters register for school or, set up birthday parties. I think once people get the chance to know me a little bit more, they see that I am also a military spouse. I am a working mom, a pandemic mom. And I appreciate Kay bringing up the mixed race part because my son is, half Chinese. And so I do think about as he grows up, kind of being half Chinese American, half Italian American, how he'll navigate those identities.
Thanks, Jenny. And last but not least, Erin.
Great. Thank you all so much for joining. It's really an honor to be on this panel with this stellar, fantastic Asian American woman. Thank you for asking this question, Soojin, because I remember when I was 10, I moved to Los Angeles from Taiwan. I didn't realize that I can have multiple identities. So I was like, what, you get to hyphenate? I thought I had to choose one. So now, I have a rebellious personality. So the identities that are most salient to me are usually the ones that people deny the most. So among Asian Americans, I identify as Taiwanese because a lot of people don't recognize that. I'm a religious person. So when I'm in a Christian community, I identify more as gay. Likewise, I identify more as Christian when I'm in a queer community. And as an American, when I'm in Asia, because I think for me, it's important to show people that we're all humans and we all hold these different facets of ourselves. And I'm continuing to explore those identities too. So ask me in 10 years, we'll see.
I like your rebellious spirit, Erin. Now, some Asian Americans, especially when we're growing up, didn't embrace being Asians as we had to endure verbal and even physical attacks because of our race. I was literally pushed to the ground, my face bloodied, and my teeth knocked out in elementary school by a boy who taunted me for being Chinese, Japanese, and you've all heard the rest. But once we got to college or grad school, many of us began to acknowledge and even embrace our Asian identity and join affinity groups. So Rebecca and Erin, I'm going to turn to you because both of you were involved in AAPI groups at the Kennedy School. Can you talk about what you got involved in and why? Erin, you were there most recently. Let's start with you.
Great. Awesome. It took me a while to unmute myself. So my journey has been interesting because when I went to college, I didn't join an Asian American group. I went to Rice University and there was a big, about I think 30% was Asian American. So like when I was growing up in Los Angeles, I didn't feel like a minority. There were lots of different Asian. It was given that, you're not just Asian American, but you also have like Taiwanese American, Chinese American, and things like that. It wasn't until I got to DC and got to Harvard when I was like, oh man, like we're a minority. Like we are not represented at the decision-making tables. And it so happened that when I got to Harvard, it was when the affirmative action case at Harvard was going on in the national debate. And I saw that the Asian American community was being pitted against other minority communities by the same people that I don't think care for our community and for minorities. And that's why I decided to join the AAPI caucus here at Harvard, the very same people who are throwing this event now. And it was really empowering because I didn't realize that what we did at Harvard actually mattered. And that together we had such a power to change the discussion. I remember a lot of my classmates were on the Washington Post talking about how just because we're Asian American doesn't mean we're against some affirmative action. And I, along with other classmates, were able to write a letter to the Biden campaign when, if some of you remember, there was a xenophobic campaign video that went out talking about, oh, how could Trump trust the Chinese as they, quote unquote, and how could you let them in when there was a travel ban? So it was really kind of because of the national discussion that made me realize that I had to be a part of the movement. I had to join in the fight.
Thanks, Erin. Rebecca, you were very involved while you were at the Kennedy School. What were your involvements?
I was. Thank you, Soojin. Yeah, the MPP program is only 2 years, so I just really wanted to make the most of my time there. So I was primarily involved in three things. So one, I helped co-found Harvard's very first Asian American Policy Conference. This was the first of its kind at the university. So worked with many folks from the HKS, Asia Pacific American Caucus, to help found that. And that happened after I graduated, but I helped lay the groundwork for that. Two, I served as editor-in-chief of the Kennedy School's Asian American Policy Review. I did that for about a year and was an editor before that. And during my tenure there, I tried to highlight stories and articles that normally would not hit that particular journal. And then we also had a more creative art cover for the journal as well, which I was really proud of. And lastly, I was a social chair of the Asian Pacific American Caucus at HKS. I just think it's really important to build community and have a sense of belonging in any new community I join. And if it doesn't exist, I am always the first one there trying to build it. And as I mentioned, 2 years is just so short. I wanted to do something impactful and, of course, eat good food, all the dim sum, and make good friends along the way.
JC, I'm going to throw out a question to you as a current student. Are those institutions still alive, well and alive at the Kennedy School?
Yes, so we do have Asian American Policy Review, but I don't think the Asian American Pacific Islander Policy Conference is still alive.
Now, as adults, Asian American women are often subjected to offensive comments or questions because of our gender, our stature, and harmful stereotypes. In a split second, we have to assess the physical and social power dynamics, and then decide whether or how to respond. Kay, can you talk about the comment made by one of your law school professors and what you did?
Sure. Well, I mean, first I'd like to start by saying that I think everyone on this panel and the vast, if not full, the entire population of Asian Americans across the country have experienced the typical jokes of the rhyming and the rude questions and the crude questions and the pulling the eyes back and all of that. So I think we're all clear that that happens and that we've all been subjected to that. And then it kind of rolls into your professional career. For me, when I was in law school, there was an adjunct professor who served as a public defender, and I was in his criminal procedure class. By way of a friend's uncle's brother's cousin's friend, or somehow I knew of a death row case where a guy was was in appeals for committing murder and was on death row for it. And I went to my professor and said, "Hey, you're a defender, and this guy, does he have this opportunity for appeal here, there, or whatever?" And I sent him an email on a Friday, and Monday after class, he said, I went to him after class. He said, "I've been waiting to talk to you." And he brought me to his office and he said, I've been around, mail order brides, and I've had to drive them to the prison to marry these guys and then drive them back to watch them executed. You don't want to mess with this guy. He killed 5 people and he killed Asian people. And you don't need to worry about whether this appeal is worthwhile or not. Just go along your way, right? And, I was just kind of such a deer in headlights at that moment and just sort of stunned that was his response. And the moment I stepped outside of his door, I was just sort of flabbergasted. And I couldn't believe that his response to me was not of an academic caliber. It was this misconception and this, this discriminatory remark that if I had been anybody else, if I had been, older or a different race or a different gender or looked differently or whatever, there's no way he would have said that to me. And it's haunted me really to think about him treating me that way. And in our preparations for this panel, I mean, reflecting on it, I really didn't do anything. And I think a large part of the conversation we're going to have today comes into hierarchies and power and control and appropriateness and what you have to lose versus what you have to gain, when it's appropriate to stand up, when it's appropriate not to. And in hindsight, I wish I had said something more, but at the same time, being able to say this now, I think is very valuable. And it's unfortunately, it's not really that surprising that stuff like that happens, but it needs to get to that point one day. Soon.
It is very common. Jenny, you had an experience as well with a cameraman when you were working on the news.
Yes. So I work in the media relations team at the council. And I love working with all the camera teams who come in. If you look on C-SPAN, there we are. For the most part, they've all been nothing but professional. So I was really shocked and kind of saddened to have a really negative interaction with an just aggressive cameraman who did not want to set up the camera in the designated area as I had politely instructed him to do so. I think for him, he took one look at me, saw that I'm a 5'4", 5'5" in heels, Asian American. He probably assumed that I was younger than I was, and that he could, get away with certain comments. He basically took the conversation in a direction to suggest that I was not American, said that I had an accent and that I was embarrassed of where I was from. Because I kind of stood my ground, and every time he asked me, where are you from? I just said, this has nothing to do with where you need to set up your camera. If you could just set up your camera, sir, in the designated area. But he just kept on going back to how, I wasn't American and I had an accent and I was embarrassed. And that's why I didn't want to tell him where I was from. I was glad that in that moment, I kept, just the focus on please set up your camera where you need to set up, and that the situation didn't escalate. But I did think about Justice Sonia Sotomayor's comment about, don't mistake my politeness for lack of strength because it is there. In thinking about it now, I don't know that I would have handled it any differently. I was glad that I stood up for myself, but I think I would have been more comfortable just kind of giving him a warning that if he didn't cooperate, I was going to have to ask him to leave, and maybe bring in my workplace security into the conversation.
Microaggressions like these happen to us frequently. Do any of you have advice for our audience on how to deal with these microaggressions? Rebecca, I think you had some ideas.
Yeah, it really depends, once again, on the context and the power dynamics, unfortunately, in hierarchy, as Kay mentioned before. But when you get the standard and the very typical, where are you really from question, my preferred method of choice these days is humor and absurdity. So when I get, where are you really from? I say the People's Republic of Ithaca, New York, if it's a fellow American asking me this, because it is ridiculous, right? And so when you flip it back on them, it kind of points to the absurdity and ridiculousness of the question without, turning it into an entirely negative situation. Also, when people ask if I was raised by tiger parents, I ask if they were raised by koala parents or name your animal, insert animal parents, because once again, it's ridiculous. And so by throwing the same question back at them, you kind of make them understand what it's like to, feel like what they just did to you. So it breaks the ice a little bit. You can both laugh at how stupid that was. And then the other person might even apologize. And so humor is, I think, very, very effective here. Sometimes it depends what it is, but for those types of questions that are sort of like low level microaggressions, I do like to use humor.
I've read that if we wanted people to hear what we're saying and to potentially change their behavior, we have to think about things that will not immediately make them defensive. So some tactics could be asking for more clarification. Could you say more about that? Why would you think that? What do you mean? Or to separate intent from impact. So saying something like, I know you may not have realized this, but when you said or did XYZ, it was hurtful or offensive because of XYZ. I remember when I first started out as a presidential management fellow, and I had to have a call with someone in the Office of Management and Budget. And I introduced myself. My name is Soojin, Kwon. And the person on the other line said, wow, your English is very good. And I thought, well, why would you assume that my English is not very good? I've been in the United States for how many years? I won the English prize in high school. I almost majored in English. You're making assumptions that are just patently misguided. So that was surprising to me over a phone call. That wasn't offensive, but it really stuck with me. I mean, clearly stuck with me to this day, that assumptions are made on the basis of even just a name. And then when they see your face, there is another set of assumptions. Rebecca has another short story to share.
I do, just going along with the theme of humor, I get that a lot as well. Your English is so good. And what I would say is yours is really good too. Where did you learn it? It works. I'm telling you guys, it works. It's so good. Because, I also almost majored in English. I've read a lot of books. And so, I don't say, yeah.
So one of the factors that likely played a role in all of us attending the Kennedy School was the prestige of it being part of Harvard University. There's an expectation that the pedigree would give us credibility and open doors. But the fact of being Asian can sometimes contravene those things. I want to ask Erin, how has being Asian American helped or hindered you in your career?
Oh, I'm sure it's helped me and hurt me in ways I don't even realize. But I will say, for me, I decided, going back to my rebellious personality, it's so rare for American diplomats to see Asian Americans serving in Asia. I have had many instances where it was not the local staff, but the Americans saying, oh, konnichiwa when I was in Tokyo, or xin jiao when I was in Vietnam, being like, oh, you're a new local staff. But so that part, I think it does suck, but I think I kind of see it as an opportunity now. It's like, okay, like this space was not meant for me, but I'm gonna take it and I'm going to make it so that more minorities can be in the space. But I think more so of my career, I purposely chose Asia as my focus because it's actually helped me a lot, not just in terms of helping people in Asia see that while like Americans do come in all sorts of shapes and forms and all sorts of diverse ways, but I can relate to a lot of the cultures much more easily because I speak Mandarin as my first language. I can learn Japanese more easily. I can learn Vietnamese more easily. And I think because I have that cultural background, I don't assume everything is cultural too when I interact with other people. I can see that culture is important, but they also make decisions because they care about their family, because they want they want the next generation to be better. So in a sense, it helps me see the human when I'm interacting with my interlocutors abroad, instead of being like, oh, it's cultural, that's why they don't like this, so kind of turning that Orientalism around, being like, yes, I understand culture is important, but we're both humans, and I can see how my background and the US culture will interact with yours and connect with yours so that we can better communicate, we can better reach similar goals and interests too.
So finding common ground in our humanity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So understanding culture, but not seeing that as everything or seeing it as also different from the US. I often compare like some people who are passive, the passive part of Japanese culture to like the Midwest, like my boyfriend will like never confront me on anything, right? Like that's not unique to Japanese culture. Like it's everywhere. So being able to see that, I think really helps me be more effective as a diplomat.
Always finding common ground is a good place to start. For those of you who are not familiar with the Foreign Service, you might expect that Asian Americans have an advantage in getting posts in Asia, but quite the opposite has been true. As I learned from Rebecca and Erin, Asian American diplomats have called the State Department out for discrimination. In fact, earlier this year, Secretary of State Blinken acknowledged what he called, quote, the alarming lack of diversity at the highest levels of the State Department. Rebecca, you also served as a diplomat. Can you share your experience as an Asian American in the Foreign Service?
Oh, yes. So similar to Erin, I was almost shocked by the racism and discrimination that I faced from my fellow American diplomats. So even prior to joining the Foreign Service, my security clearance took 3.5 years. As I mentioned before, I'm a daughter of Chinese immigrants. I was born in the United States. I'm an American citizen, but the way that diplomatic security and others treated me, it was as if I was disloyal to the United States. That was the default assumption, and that I wasn't a citizen. And so it's very uncommon to have a security clearance take 3.5 years. So because of that, I actually lost out on a lot of opportunities. The Pickering Fellowship, which is a fellowship I joined the State Department under, it's a fellowship that is trying to promote women and people of color to join the Foreign Service to make the United States more diverse, our diplomats more diverse, as America is. So I joined that fellowship, got into the Foreign Service, but because my security clearance took 3.5 years, they kicked me out of the program. So because of that, I lost out on all the funding actually for the Harvard Kennedy School, and I had to drop out for a semester. And I wasn't sure if I could even continue graduate studies, and I couldn't afford graduate education without a fellowship of some kind. So it was a really stressful period for me. Eventually, my security clearance did come through. They just asked for my resume and transcript. I could have given this 4 years ago, but eventually came through. I rejoined the Kennedy School, finished my degree, and joined the Foreign Service. While I was in the Foreign Service, I had a lot of people sort of, again, question my identity and how I could possibly represent the United States. I would expect this from host countries. I would not expect this from fellow Americans. Even during language class, when I was learning Turkish to go to my first post in Istanbul, fellow diplomats would compliment me on how good my English was. When I arrived at post in Istanbul, I was assumed to be the wife of several white male diplomats. At the consulate, I was told to sit in the cafeteria with, quote, all the other wives. And people just could not see me in the role of US diplomat. I was a political officer at the US consulate covering human rights, religious freedom, domestic politics, including elections. I was, I had a prominent role to play at that consulate, but no one believed me for about 3 months that I actually worked where I said I worked, even when I was in the building and had the badge. So that was, hurtful, frustrating, but also very, I didn't have time for the racism and discrimination because I had a job to do. And during the first 3 months in Turkey, I was managing a presidential delegation at the UN World Humanitarian Summit. There were several terrorist attacks, including a triple ISIS suicide attack at the Istanbul Ataturk airport. And we had a coup attempt on July 15th. So there was so much going on that I just had to put that aside and focus on my job. And in that particular tour, I didn't have time to respond to everyone. I just had to do my job, and I delivered results. And by the end of my tour, I won a meritorious honor award, which sits right there for my work representing the United States on rule of law, human rights, and religious freedom. So, and I got a standing ovation at the award ceremony. So that was one of the situations where I just put my head down, I worked hard, and results spoke for themselves at the end. But, I shouldn't have had to go through all of that by fellow Americans. I was looking forward to the opportunities where I could explain to Turks, who I was, where I'm from, and how I got to become a US diplomat. And I did that, but I shouldn't have had to explain that to fellow Americans. And so I'm glad the department is making some progress in this area. I think they're making some motions, yet to see if there will be progress here. But I'm still passionate about the work that the department does and think this is an area that they need to tackle if they want to retain talent and also promote US foreign policy effectively around the world.
Thanks for sharing that, Rebecca. I want to share some statistics. Despite having the highest educational attainment, highest median income, and lowest unemployment rate of any racial or ethnic group in the US, Asian Americans are underrepresented in US leadership positions, the so-called bamboo ceiling, across most sectors. We make up 13% of the US professional workforce, but only 6% of executive roles. About 11% of associates at US law firms are Asian, but only 3% of partners are. New York banks have a similar problem. In 2017, Bloomberg reported that Goldman Sachs had a 27% Asian American workforce overall, but only 11% of US executives and senior managers were of Asian descent, and 0 executive officers of Asian descent. In the federal government, A 2016 report found that Asian Americans made up 5.8% of the federal professional workforce, but only 3.5% made it to the senior level. Even in technology, where Asians are the ethnic group most likely to be hired, over 30% of the workforce, they are the least likely to be promoted to senior leadership positions, less than 15% of executives. So we are highly underrepresented in leadership roles. Jenny, you've worked in media at 3 venerable organizations, CNN, the Brookings Institution, and now the Council on Foreign Relations. What has been your experience in that sector as far as Asian Americans in leadership goes? Has a path been paved? Do you have any role models to follow?
Thank you for sharing those helpful statistics, Soojin, and thank you for the question. I would like to think that I am paving the road for some people who aspire to work in think tank communications. But I think as you laid out, there is still a distance between just in our country across all sectors of kind of where we are and where we could be between like, you know, what we say we are, which is inclusive, welcoming, and like who we are right now. I think that sometimes for everyone probably on this panel, being the only is rather lonely, but that also can be our strength. I know for me being, you know, an Asian American woman kind of working at the intersection of media and foreign policy, I am keenly aware of what lack of representation looks like on screen and in print. So I'm even more encouraged to use my own strengths in pitching and editing to work with female foreign policy experts, people of color, younger, more diverse experts, to get their names, faces, and voices out there, to tell their stories and share their perspectives. And also just, again, working in communications, I really appreciate the importance of precision of language. After the attacks in Atlanta this year, the Asian American Journalists Association and the AP issued guidance on how to more responsibly cover issues of importance to the AAPI community. I know they emphasize providing context, being descriptive, and avoiding euphemisms. So if an act was indeed racist, to label it as such instead of saying racially charged. And then also in foreign policy or just policy in general, you know, not to conflate the Chinese government with the Chinese people. And when we talk about migration, Professor Gregory Lee from the University of Lyon talked about the inundation metaphor. And so, you know, when we talk about refugees or migrants, to avoid things like a flood of refugees or wave of migrants. His research actually traced this metaphor back to the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1892, which, you know, excluded families like Rebecca's and mine, who specifically Chinese people, from coming to the United States. So, you know, people don't flood and people don't flow. People migrate, they move, they arrive, they pass through, they travel. So just some of my thoughts from someone who thinks about words on a daily basis, and it just, you know, how important it is for us to share our stories. So again, my thanks to the Ash Center and to all my panelists today for the opportunity to share our stories and our thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Recently, Asian Americans have had a couple historic wins and role models to celebrate. One is the election of Michelle Wu as Boston's first woman and person of color to be elected mayor. And the other is the introduction of Ji Young as the first Asian American Muppet on Sesame Street to counter anti-Asian sentiment. What do these developments mean to you? Let's start with Rebecca.
Yeah, I posted about both on LinkedIn just a couple of weeks ago because I was just over the moon about our representation where it matters in politics and in media, in arenas that are hugely influential in shaping hearts and minds and in changing power structures, really. So it was so heartening to see Michelle Wu, you know, glass and bamboo ceiling shattered. I heard the crunching, I swear. It was just so great. It was really great. And then to see the first Asian American Muppet, Ji Young on Sesame Street, I was like, wow, if Ji-young was a Muppet when I was a kid, you know, I think my perception of myself and other Asian American kids' perceptions of themselves would have been totally different. It would have been okay to go to school with a quote smelly lunch. We may not have been made fun of as much when we were in elementary school. You know, those feelings of shame and insecurity about our identity might, you know, have been far lessened and ameliorated because we had someone to look up to. And I think that, yeah, it's just fantastic that Sesame Workshop is really doing the work by sending a new message with Ji-young. And so, yeah, it'll change the way that children and adults around the world think about Asian Americans. It's going to make it okay for us to be us. And there's never a better time to have that realization than earlier in life and earlier in history. So I think that, you know, she represents more than just a Muppet. She is like representing all of us and is making it okay for us to be us and making it okay for others to acknowledge us and not as something else. And I think that's incredibly powerful.
Absolutely. One of the things that I really got a chuckle out of was when Michelle Wu got elected, one of her sons asked her if boys could be elected to mayor. I mean, representation matters. What you see in the media shapes opinions of young people. And so it is so important that we have Asian Americans and women in these very visible roles, whether it is in politics or in children's media. One of the things that I read about Ji-young is that she's going to teach children how to be a good upstander. That's a lesson that's critical to changing our culture and making it more inclusive. And I'd say that's a lesson that's not only that children should learn, but the rest of us too. The last question I'd like to ask before we open it up for audience Q&A is, what advice do you have for fellow Asian Americans as they navigate their careers? And before other people steal good answers, I'm going to start with my own set of advice bullets. So Asian Americans are raised to believe that if you work hard and you don't complain and you do a good job, that you'll be rewarded and treated fairly. But that doesn't really happen. The notion that organizations are meritocracies, it's false. You need to be visible and you need to be an advocate for yourself. So that calls for two things. One is get comfortable speaking up in one-on-one situations, as well as in group meetings, and raise your hand to be the one to deliver presentations. Make your voice, make your person seen and heard. You'll get more comfortable with it the more you do it. Second is seek out roles that will expose you to decision makers and senior leaders. And obviously, do great work as your parents would expect you to do. Kay, what would be your advice to young people?
Sure.
Or anyone in their careers?
No, great. First of all, your advice is outstanding, and I second all of that. I think in addition to that, I think it's really important that we examine the totality of the circumstances around us and understand the variables at play in any particular circumstance. And to understand who you're talking to at the moment, where you're trying to get with it, what the outcome is, what your potential liabilities or losses could be, and to really weigh a full picture and to not approach every circumstance with this ideology of, I believe this, if you believe something else, then we disagree, right? And kind of what Rebecca was talking about when she uses humor to push back on someone's misstatement or bad assumption or something like that. I think that it's important for us to take those individual circumstances and weigh the way that other people are seeing us, where we are. You know, my mom's family lives in East Texas. If I'm in the grocery store and some good old country boy comes up to me and says, "What are you?" I'm going to respond very differently than if one of you at the Harvard Kennedy School comes to me and says the same thing. I think that's obvious, but it's also very easy to get wrapped up in your own perceptions to the point where you're immediately dismissive of others or ridicule others or offend others in your process of trying to correct them. But that it's very good to instead take that time to educate others and to tell them why what they said was harmful, or why where you're trying to get is important, or whatever that might be, and to especially allow others to have room to disagree with you, no matter how opposed you are to their views. In the Kennedy School, I remember telling someone that I was an oil and gas attorney, actually someone from the AAPI community, and literally this person about faced and walked away from me. They didn't know if I was working on, carbon sequestration or environmental. They had no idea. All I said was oil and gas attorney from Texas, and they were like, I was out of their realm of potential collaborators, really. And that's that kind of mentality I think you see a lot at the Kennedy School. And I think that as people approach their careers and have to navigate these challenging circumstances that we all come across, the more aware they are of their circumstances, and the more that they're willing to open the dialogue, the better off we're going to be able to meet in the middle. And I guess on top of that, I think that having the confidence to sort of stand up and say something is very crucial for our community. I've told you guys a story about the Manhattan Project Brewing Company, which is a Texas microbrewery in Dallas, and they have branded themselves after the Manhattan Project from the atomic bomb, and they have beers like plutonium-238 and second half-life or double half-life, and there's two. One of them is the Necessary Evil, and the other are the Wise Monkeys. The Necessary Evil being a beer the Necessary Evil was an observation plane that took pictures of the bomb after it was dropped, I think in Hiroshima. And the Wise Monkeys is a famous shrine in Japan, the Hear No Evil, See No Evil, Speak No Evil monkeys. And I found myself asking dozens of people, like, is this okay? Is it okay for me to be offended by this? Like, I'm not sure. Like, I feel offended, but is anyone else offended? And that sort of questioning of the self is healthy, but also it can stop our community from taking advocacy seriously and combining our joint efforts to really attack issues when we doubt ourselves and we doubt our community and we don't know who to rally or how to rally our troops to stand up for an issue. So I think that a combination of looking holistically at pictures and having the courage to stand up and knowing how to organize people to address issues that we care about is fundamental to our success and our ability to gain leadership positions and representation.
Thanks, Kay. Rebecca?
Yeah, so I've got three buckets of advice. So one is on power, the second self-care, and the third is learning and questioning. So on power, speak up and recognize your power, because we all have power from where we sit, and it's far more than you think. Take action and live your values. On self-care, number 2, seek out and surround yourself with allies. This is really important. And also take care of yourself. This is what I'm on right now. Empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. The last one on third, learn and question. Meet a lot of people, different kinds of people. In this way, you can learn about their hopes and dreams and the future they want to live in. And then also, I would say read a lot, read and learn a lot, or watch documentaries and movies, but educate yourself on history and systems. So much of what we face today, including systemic racism, is a variation and a consequence of what's happened before in history. So read James Baldwin, read Toni Morrison, read Asian American Dreams by Helen Zia. That book really opened my eyes to Asian American history. Learn about the rape of Nanjing. I didn't learn about that until I was 17, and I wondered why this was in none of my US history textbooks. So yeah, learn and question.
Thanks, Rebecca. Jenny?
I'll share some advice that I give to my 2 younger sisters. And that is, as Soojin, you mentioned, just kind of be prepared that those moments will take place. Even with your college credentials or the Kennedy School, that's not always a suit of armor to protect you from situations that you'll have to deal with. And when you're having those uncomfortable moments, when you're dealing with microaggressions or slights, just remember, even though it might be our faces that flush red with discomfort or embarrassment, that the shame of those moments belong to the people on the other end. And just give yourself time to process the disappointments and setbacks and slights, but go back to your touchstone. I know Rebecca mentioned values. Go back to your values, like what drives you, what is your North Star, and then know your own value, like what you are contributing to an organization, to your community, to your family. I always find that that is kind of what steers me in the right direction again, and kind of renews my sense of strength.
Values is always a good thing to turn back on. And finally, Erin, what is your advice to people navigating their careers as Asian Americans?
Yeah, I just started. I don't know. I'm just kidding. So I think the first one is just be the best version of yourself. Because just by you doing that, we think of like, oh, I have to go out and march. I have to do this. I have to do that. But like just being you and being the best version of yourself, doing the best at where you are, that already makes a difference, right? Like showing excellence, showing different types of excellence that our Asian American community can bring. I think that's already really powerful, like just by doing that. And then second is just to know the power that you have within. I really didn't learn this until I got to Harvard, because I grew up with, keep your heads down, just work hard, like these things are above your pay grade, these things are beyond you. But, power, if from a physics perspective, is just the ability to move something. So if you want to do something, have a community, seek out advice, brainstorm with people that you trust, but just do it. Like you'll be surprised how oftentimes it doesn't take a genius. It doesn't take someone who is so skilled at something. It just takes someone who's willing to be a part of solution, and being a part of a community that works to make this place a better place. And then the third one is on community. This work is very tiring. It's gonna wear you out. Like if you feel like you're in this on your own, you're gonna like rip out your hair. You're gonna be like, oh my gosh, like how do I ever do this? But it's only with, I had people, like I'm gonna give a shout out to Kareem, who is at the Asian American Foundation, or Emily at AJC, people who are like, no, we need to keep going. Like, let's have a night session where we just complain about how terrible the world is. But the next day we're gonna get up and figure out what to do. So those are my advice.
Community can be super important as we're trying to navigate our careers. It is our responsibility, I feel like, as we move up in our own careers, that we bring others along, other Asian Americans, other people like us, because the opportunities are so slim that we need to give each other a hand. Jenny, speaking of giving a hand.
Thank you. I also wanted to add one more note, and that is own your successes and celebrate them. Something Erin said reminded me about, my parents always taught me to kind of keep my head down, work hard, be humble. And so to kind of showcase my wins often felt uncomfortable in a professional setting, but particularly as a woman, it is really important to take credit for your work. And so I really appreciate colleagues that have encouraged me to do so and helped me to become more comfortable saying, I did this. And so I encourage everyone else to do that as well.
That's great advice. We have only a few minutes left, and there are a few questions in the Q&A box, and 2 have been upvoted. So I will start with a question about the bamboo ceiling. And that is, how do we balance the push for more AAPI representation in senior leadership without boxing out or undermining other minority groups, especially from Black and Latinx communities? Does anyone want to chime in?
I can chime in a little bit. I think that the concept of allyship is our best friend, really. When it really comes down to things in the demographics and the statistics and the numbers and the people in power and the people we need to influence and the institutions we need to influence, I think there are strengths in numbers, and that there are universal truths across the discrimination that people of color face. I think that the more that we collaborate, I think that for any sort of advocacy, it's mostly about winning outside parties onto your side, right? So we can't do it as a community just by ourselves. We must reach outside of our community. And so I think that when we partner and we group and we talk and we We work with Black community and Latinx communities and others that are, that are promoting themselves and advocating for themselves, that we can get to a greater place working together. And I think that's one of the hardest challenges for the AAPI community because of, model minority conversations and the concept of, that we're better represented in just the regular employment pool, and you're not really taking into consideration the leadership roles and getting everybody on the same page to understand that, if Asian Americans truly are better represented, then they should be truly represented at the top. So if you want the rising tide to lift all of these boats, then support our community as we support yours, but to be sure that we also support their community when we ask for it in return.
Absolutely. Allyship is critical for all of us. Rebecca wanted to chime in as well.
Yeah, I would just want to add that I do fundamentally disagree with the implicit premise in that question that this is somehow a zero-sum game. When Asian Americans get to leadership positions, what we can do is expand the pie, right? Increase access and increase actual opportunity for everyone, not just for other Asian Americans, but also Black, Latinx, and many other different types of minorities as well.
Thank you. Jenny or Aaron, did you want to add? Okay, and there's one more upvoted question, and this will probably be our final question. We know that Asian Americans have faced more discrimination and racism during COVID-19 than most people. Can any of you speak to your experiences during the pandemic?
I'll just share a personal story, and that is, it was kind of strange to be worried about the physical safety of my mom and dad doing something as basic as going for a nightly stroll after dinner, where I would check in on them and say, be careful, be mindful, don't go out if it's too late. If something happens, let me know. And also checking in on my little sisters and saying, you're young Asian American women, just, please be mindful and please be safe. And that was kind of a discomforting feeling after having been in the United States for 30 some years, to worry about their safety. But the statistics show that, it was the elders and the women in our community who were targeted. So just a really uncomfortable and sad reality to have gone through.
I didn't let my parents go to the grocery store for 6-9 months because I didn't want them to potentially face any kind of discriminatory remarks or violence, just as a precaution, because we read about so many things happening all over, especially to the elderly. Well, we are just about out of time. I appreciate all of you for joining us, and especially our panelists, Jenny, Erin, Kay, and Rebecca. I also want to thank the Ash Center for putting this series on. This is the second of a series around AAPI issues. And I hope we can chat again. This was a lively discussion, and hopefully everyone got to take something out of it. With that, anyone want to say any more remarks before we close? Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. And for those of you who celebrate